I learned to fall asleep by listening to the building breathe. Not the big breaths, elevators sighing, doors thudding shut, but the tiny inhales that only arrive after midnight. A radiator murmuring like a kettle trying to remember a song, an exit sign humming in a note you can only hear if you lean into it. The rain giving the fire escape a patient, metallic applause. At the station, the night was a soft place. It held me without asking for anything back. The on-air booth wasn't much. A rectangle of glass, a desk with scars, two microphones that made everyone sound kinder than they believed themselves to be. If I cupped my hands around the headphones and pressed them against my ears, the room folded into a small, safe globe. My voice sat inside it, a candle cupped from wind. "Midnight check-in?" June asked, hip bumping the door so it clicked shut. She'd brought coffee. June always brought coffee, 2 cups, twin steam spirals, mine marked with a crooked V for Valesse in black marker that sometimes smudged onto my fingers. "Mic 2, I said. "And don't slurp. I'm recording room tone." "I would never," she whispered, then slurped, laughing silently, eyes crinkling in the glass. Her hair today was knotted up with a pencil, like a lighthouse mast with a single flag. We were building something together, or I thought we were. A nighttime show that didn't tell you where to go, only offered a hand while you walked there. I called it Lighthouse Hours in the half-joking way you name stray cats you're not sure you can keep. June called it a vibe. "Pitch meetings in the morning," she said, setting the coffee down on a coaster I'd made from cardboard and gaffer tape. "You ready?" "I'm ready," I said. The waveform on my screen pulsed like a slow heartbeat. I cut a pilot. "I want to start with a door." "A door?" "Not the sound," I said. "The invitation. You're not failing if you're tired, or, tonight, there's room for you. Something simple." June nodded, her earrings catching the booth light like little moons. "It's good," she said. "It's necessary. There are moments you don't know are pre-cracks until the glass breaks." June taking a second copy of my pilot, just in case. Elliot asking me to send the deck to both of them instead of through me first. A comment from a producer about my name, "Mara Valesse is beautiful, but can we anglicize for market?" The kind of remark that smiles while it trims your edges. At 2:13 a.m., I recorded breaths, my own, counted, the booths imagined. At 2:40, I stood in the hallway to measure how long the fluorescent lights took to stop buzzing after you flicked them off, 5 seconds and a half. At 3:05, I stopped trying to name the fear that crept in when a project you love is finally close enough to be taken from you. "Don't catastrophize," June said as we locked up. "They'll love it." "I don't need them to love it," I said. "I need it to be honest." "Honesty isn't as marketable," she teased, then ran back to press a foam ear to the glass. "Listen. The building's purring." I listened. It was. And I thought, if the building can be kind in the dark, maybe we can be too. I wish that had been the future. Elliot's office had a couch shaped like an apology. You could sit on it if you needed to cry, and you might, but you'd never be quite comfortable. He wore his kindness like a tie real, but a little too tight for him. "Okay," he said, sliding the deck across his desk so it faced him, not me. "Walk me through Lighthouse Hours." The way he said it made me feel like a kid spelling out her own name. "It's a nightly show that doesn't lecture," I said. "It keeps company. Think guided daydreams. Soundscapes with stories that ask listeners to imagine themselves inside a safe place. The voices, gentle." "Gentle," he repeated, making a note. "And the audience?" "People who are tired," I said. "People who've been told to grind, optimize, hustle, and are finally brave enough to say they're lonely instead. Night shifters, new parents, students, anyone who misses a voice that doesn't demand a thing from them." He nodded. June added, "We've got demos," and tapped the laptop I had brought. "We." On the first slide, my title card sat in the center like a small candle. On Elliot's second monitor, another deck was already open, bright, glossy. I saw it only because the reflection caught in the glass of a framed certificate. Lighthouse Hours, but the H was lowercase and the font was cleaner. Below it, concept lead, J. Sandoval. J. Sandoval. June. I looked down so my face wouldn't betray me before I understood what I was seeing. I walked him through the beats. The door. The promise that every episode would begin with something ordinary made sacred, untangling headphones, folding a sweater, taking off your shoes, and finding your feet right where you left them. He listened. He tilted his head. He asked the management questions. "Show me the unique differentiator," he said. "More hook. What's the one-liner?" "It's not trying to fix you," I said softly. "It's willing to sit with you." Elliot smiled in that winced way that meant he liked it, but didn't think it would test well. He glanced, just once, at the other deck. After the meeting, June and I walked the long hallway, our shoes clicking in a pattern that used to feel like a rhythm between us. She didn't look at me. "Did you make another deck?" I asked, as calmly as I could. I heard my voice as if it were coming through poor headphones. Tinny, a little too far away. She held her breath long enough that it almost qualified as an answer. "It's the station's deck," she said finally. "They asked me to polish. Just in case." "In case I what?" "In case you got precious." The elevator arrived. We stepped in. June pressed the lobby button like a punctuation point. "I would have helped polish," I said. "I could have." "They wanted a different angle," she said. "Positioning, packaging, you know. And credit." She looked at the ascending numbers above the door, as if there was something useful on the floor between 3 and 4. "Mara," she said softly, "don't make this a thing." It was already a thing. It had been a thing the first time she asked for a copy just in case. It had been a thing when Elliot stopped replying to my 2 a.m. ideas, but Hart reacted to hers in the group chat. It had been a thing the night I recorded Rain for an hour while she canceled on me, then posted a selfie at a panel titled "Finding Your Nighttime Voice." "Okay," I said. "Then let's be clear. This is my show. If you're a producer on it, I'm thrilled. But you don't get to put your name over mine." "Don't be adversarial," she said. "They hate that." The elevator doors opened into a lobby that always smelled like a new book. I loved that smell. Paper and possibility. June walked ahead, heels quick, the pencil in her hair like a tiny flag. I watched her go and thought about lighthouses. They don't move. The light moves around them. The job is to stand and shine, even when the water below you tries to rename you wave. I told myself, be a lighthouse. I told myself, breathe. And then the press release went out. It was quick. Faster than approvals usually came. Faster than anything moved when it was mine. A soft launch announcement on the station's socials. Coming soon, Night Harbor, a new show from producer June Sandoval. A gentle, imaginative late-night companion for your restless hours. Night Harbor was my logline with a different title. It was my door, my promise, my field tape from the fire escape. It was my breathwork script clipped and sanded and read by another mouth. I stared at the announcement until the words went blurry. I called Elliot. He didn't pick up. I texted June. She didn't write back. It is a particular kind of floating to watch your own idea sail past you, a deck chair dragged across the deck, your name falling off like a tag in heavy wind. You can shout, but the ship's already further than your voice can throw. At 2:11 a.m., the building's breath felt like a stranger's. At 3:04, the exit sign hummed a note I couldn't hold. At 3:58, I cried into my sleeve on Elliot's couch and called it collecting room tone. In the morning, Elliot finally texted, "Come by when you can. Let's talk." Elliot tried to understand. He really did. He used his hands to draw little boxes in the air to sort feelings from facts. He said words like miscommunication and team and brand continuity, and he looked tired in the way people look when they have chosen the path of least resistance and would like you to join them there. "Look," he said, "no one is questioning your contribution." "They're erasing it," I said, voice flat. I wasn't angry. I had sailed past anger into a cold, clear water where you can see all the way down to the bottom. That's what happens when you put a name on something. It becomes the story people remember. Elliot steepled his fingers. The station has to make decisions that are viable. June has experience being the face of a brand. You're excellent at the textures. Textures. The word made me feel like a throw pillow. I don't want to be the face, I said. I want to be credited. And compensated. And I want the show to be what it is. We can add a created by credit in the show notes, he offered, as if he were sliding me a bandage for a broken bone. We can discuss back end once we have numbers. I brought you the numbers, I said. I brought you a pilot and a format and the letters from listeners who found the demo online and wrote to say it helped them sleep because it didn't tell them to. It just lay there next to them in the dark. Elliot's eyes softened. Mara, I know you feel hurt. I am hurt, I said gently. That's not a feeling. That's a bruise. He sighed and took off his glasses and massaged the bridge of his nose like the problem lived there. June says she developed the concept. June polished the deck, I said. She didn't sit with the building until it taught her how to breathe. It could have stayed words. Accusations, replies, the endless relabeling of the same fact from different angles. But the storm needs a sky warm enough to hold it, and ours was humid with resentment and fear. The announcement went public at noon. By 5, my inbox had become a chorus of congratulations I couldn't swallow. So proud of you, Mara, friends wrote, including the link, skimming past the name they expected to see and filling it in with mine. My mother sent a string of fireworks emojis and the words, "Me Pharaoh, my lighthouse." I put my phone face down. At 6, I went into Studio B and watched the red light reflect itself onto 1,000 fingerprints on the glass. I recorded a message to myself. If you are hearing this, I said, you're lost. You didn't mean to be, but you are. It's not your fault that the map was wrong or the light moved or the shore pretended to be a soft place and then bit you like a dog that forgot your smell. This is a voice saying, I know. Sit. I'll breathe with you. The door opened. June stood in the frame, her silhouette carved out of the hallway brightness. She wasn't wearing her earrings. Her hair was down. You shouldn't be in here, she said. I booked it, I said. I hadn't. No one had booked anything. The board displayed a blank grid. The studio belonged to whoever was brave enough to claim it. She stepped in and shut the door behind her. The room shrank around the thud. I didn't steal your show, she said, and the careful way she chose the words told me the conversation had been practiced in a mirror. I guarded it. I gave it a name they'd accept. I made space for it to exist. And for you to be its son. She flushed. They don't back concept creators, she said. They back faces. I can get this on air and you can make it beautiful. Why isn't that enough? Because I wanted to be a person, not an instrument. Because I had been the only witness to the night the building taught me how to breathe, and I wanted that to count for something beyond the hum under someone else's name. Because love of work, of people, requires boundaries, or it isn't love, it's consumption. It isn't, I said. Her mouth set. Her eyes brightened with anger she'd call disappointment later. Elliot says we can credit you as producer. I'm the creator, I said. And I'm not going to pretend otherwise just because it's tidy. Don't be dramatic, she said. This is how it works. The mic in front of me was still on. The red light listened. Our breaths tangled. For a moment, I wanted to reach for her hand to say, we can fix this. We can be better than this. But the part of me that had slept in a soft place for months finally stood up. Get out, I said, quietly. Her eyebrows rose. Excuse me. Get out of the room, I taught to breathe. She left. The door clicked like a lid. I sat in the scraped-up chair and stared at the board until the levels softened into a constellation of tiny, indifferent stars. Then I did what I have always done when I don't know what else to do. I walked. The city at night wears its mistakes like jewelry. You can see them better under certain lights. I walked past the deli that never closes, past the laundromat with its rows of silver eyes, past the mural of a woman whose hair is a river and a sky at once. I walked until my feet felt like questions I was asking the sidewalk. When I came home, the hallway smelled wrong. Not bad. Not smoke. Just not mine. I slid the key into the lock and paused. The apartment greeted me with a darkness that felt crowded. I turned on the light and realized what it was: absence with edges. Boxes shifted. Drawers not quite closed. The odd, faint perfume of a stranger's hands. I had been burgled. Not of money. Of drafts. My laptop hadn't moved. My little recorder, the one with the chipped corner, sat where I had left it. But the notebooks. The fat, spiraled ones with the covers worn smooth from writing in my bag. The envelope of letters from listeners who'd found the demo and sent me pieces of their lives, those were gone. On the kitchen table, a note on torn ruled paper. If you're going to accuse me of stealing, at least give me something worth stealing. No signature. But I knew the hand. June had tidy, upright handwriting, as if the words were standing at attention. This was jagged. Tilted. Something performed. I stared until the letters stopped looking like themselves. I told myself, she wouldn't. She couldn't. When the fire came, the next day, it felt almost merciful. It made rational what already felt destroyed. The official word was electrical, which is what you call it when no one wants it to be fault. I came home to sirens, to black water shining in the hallway, to a firefighter with soft eyes telling me it happened fast, as if speed were kindness. My door had been kicked in by a boot big enough to be a fact. Smoke climbed the stairwell like a habit it didn't know how to break. Inside, the absence with edges had become an absence with teeth. The couch had given up its shape. The bookshelf had turned into a dark ribcage. In the bedroom, my comforter was a map of a coastline no one would ever live on again. The little jar of seashells I kept by the window, tiny white ears I held to listen for far water, had melted into a pale, alien puddle. I stepped wrong and heard a sound like thin ice cracking. It was the fire alarm from the hallway underfoot. "Ma'am," someone said, a hand on my arm. "You can't be in here." I nodded. I left. On the landing, through the haze, I watched a stream of dirty water carry a paper scrap to the stairwell drain. It looked like one of my pages, but it might have been a grocery list, a bill, the corner of a pizza coupon. It disappeared. The firefighter's hand was still on my sleeve, as if I might float away. I didn't cry then. Shock is a strange parent. It takes your face in its hands and says, "Not yet." In the motel that night, the television made patient noise. I turned it off. The silence felt like a dress that didn't fit, too tight in the chest. I lay on the bedspread with my shoes on and stared at the speckled ceiling until the speckles looked like islands. I picked one and sailed to it and named it Gentle. I slept, but not all the way. It was the kind of sleep you have when there's a storm 5 miles away and your skin can feel the pressure change. At 2:03 a.m., I reached for my phone and opened the voice memo app. The red button looked like a door. "If you are hearing this," I said, "I know you survived something you didn't deserve. I know you can't find your room because the house is gone. So we'll make a new room. It won't have walls that can burn. It will have breath. Listen." I held up the phone to the motel window. Somewhere outside, an air conditioner exhaled, then exhaled again. My own breathing found it. We matched. "Tonight," I whispered, "there's room for you." I pressed stop. I named the file Thread 001. Not an episode. A thread. Something I could hold on to. Something I could stitch with later. In the morning, Elliot called. He sounded like a man trying to choose a gentle word in a rough mouth. "Are you okay?" he asked. "No," I said. "But I'm here." "I heard about everything," he said. "We can give you a few days. Do you have somewhere to stay? There's a couch in the green room." "I'll manage," I said. "Thank you." "You should know," he added, and I could hear the paper-thin empathy rustle. "Night Harbor is moving forward. I wanted to tell you myself." I closed my eyes. The motel room watched with all its belongingless furniture. "Of course it is," I said. "Good night, Elliot." It's 9 in the morning. "It's still night here," I said, and hung up. I made coffee in a machine that smelled like old coins. I took the first sip and let it sit bitter on my tongue, a small cruelty I could control. Then I opened my phone, played Thread 001, and listened until the AC and my breath lifted each other like two hands on the same box, carrying. I had lost almost everything I could hold. But I had a sound. And sound goes everywhere. There's a sound a room makes when it stops being a room. It is not the roar, though there is roaring, yes, the kind that teaches your bones new rattles. It is not even the hiss of water meeting heat and deciding, mid-argument, to become steam. The sound is smaller. It's the brittle sigh of corners giving up their angle, of drawers unlearning their glide, of picture frames letting go of the faces they held. I heard that sound the day after the motel, standing behind the yellow tape, because the tape had decided what counted as alive and I, for now, did. The building smelled like a memory you couldn't wash out. Strangers' breath made ghosts in the cold. A fire inspector with eyebrows like soft moths told me phrases shaped like sympathy. Electrical, he said again, the word a blanket he put over everything scorched. You'll need to contact your landlord. The Red Cross has hotel vouchers. I'm sorry. I nodded. I thanked him for his careful words. I went to the corner bodega and held an orange in my palm like a planet I could own for 99 cents. When I bit it later, in the green room at the station, it sprayed a tiny sun into the air, and for a whole minute I believed sweetness might survive anything. Take the couch, Elisa from engineering said, thrusting a folded blanket at me. She always wore lipstick the color of decisions. Don't argue. I can't. You can, she said. That's what the couch is for. Don't let the interns fool you. This couch predates all of us. It was built to carry lost people. I lay down, shoes off, voice recorder on the floor under my fingertips like a talisman. The green room was the kind of green that happens when a painter once heard the phrase sage walls and then added one more brushful, then one more. The soda machine hummed as if it were practicing a note in secret. I did not sleep, not really. I drifted. My mind stayed standing even while my body tried to sit. In the morning, I washed my face in the studio sink with paper towels that left my cheeks printed with ghosts. At noon, a producer I didn't know brought me tea and said, "I love your work." I tried to swallow the compliment without letting it cut. "Thank you," I said. She hovered. She wanted to say the other word. Night Harbor. I nodded before she could, to save us both. Her mouth made a shape of regret, and she left. Elliot passed by the door once, twice. On the third pass he came in and stood like a boy who had broken something and was waiting to be told where to put the pieces. "I can get you temp hours," he said. "Overnights. We're short on board ops. You can be here." Credit for Night Harbor? I asked, not because I expected it, but because a person must exercise the muscle of their own name or it atrophies. He winced. "We're locked." "Of course," I said. "Thank you for the hours." He nodded, grateful for any sentence that marched toward logistics. "There's a locker you can use. And, we'll replace your key card. Paperwork. You know. Paperwork. You know." That afternoon, I walked to a thrift store that had survived 3 different neighborhoods by simply never closing. I bought a duffel with a broken zipper that still believed in me. I rolled my blanket into it. I tucked the orange peels in the trash and wondered if you could make a life out of always moving toward the next room that would let you sit. That night, alone in Studio B, I turned all the lights off and sat on the floor with my back against the wall. Silence arrived like a careful friend. I pressed record and spoke to the dark. "If you are hearing this," I whispered, "you lost a place that knew your name. The door you used to use is a dream now. But you're not a door. You're not a wall. You are breath, and breath is a place." I let the room breathe with me. The air vent exhaled, just a little. I counted heartbeats between. I named the file thread 002. On my way back to the green room couch, I passed the production office. Through the glass I could see June's back, the shape of her shoulders a sharp line. She was alone. She was not alone, she was with the show. Her head tilted toward a pair of headphones, as if the sound had a secret. She didn't look up. I kept walking. My feet learned a new rhythm. Step, step, leave. At 2:19 a.m., I woke to the soda machine clicking like a small clock resetting itself. I wrote a list in the dim: socks, toothbrush, notebook. Then I crossed out notebook because I didn't want to invite that absence into the room. I played thread 001 and thread 002 in the order of a rope. Morning smudged the cracked blinds. I made coffee in the break room and held it in both hands. The steam warmed the part of my face tears had cooled. I was not okay, but I was here. I had lost an apartment and a show and the map of my friendship, but I still had a mouth and a microphone and a city full of noises willing to teach me new names for home. I went to find them. Overnights are gentler when you surrender to their logic. You stop pretending you live in a different clock. You become fluent in empty elevators and the way the streetlights take turns with darkness like polite dancers. You learn the difference between 2:30 quiet and 4:10 quiet. I ran the board for syndicated programs that rolled in like trains arriving exactly on time. I checked levels and watched the view meters like a heartbeat I could keep alive by looking hard enough. When the breaks arrived, the station went local for 15 seconds. "You're listening to WJLM," I said, and my own voice slid past me out into the night like a paper boat you can only hope makes it to some small harbor. In the minutes the computers didn't need me, I walked the building and collected breath. The stairwell had a different reverb on every landing, like a choir practicing one line at a time. The fourth floor held onto footsteps like secrets. The basement, with its humming racks and blinking lights, felt like the throat of a patient machine. At 3:07 a.m. on a Thursday that pretended to be Friday, I stepped outside onto the loading dock to remind my body that the sky still existed. A mist hung in the air like the city's invisible coat. Down the alley, a red light bloomed in a shop window and then steadied. I followed it. The light belonged to a violin shop I had somehow never noticed. The hand-painted sign above the door read Lutheria Santos. The last name curved as if it were listening to itself. The little bell over the handle kept its voice to itself when I stepped in. The place smelled like wood the way a church smells like prayer, something ingrained. "Sorry," I said. "Too late to be sensible, I didn't mean to." "Nobody means anything this late," a voice replied, amused. "We just are." He stood behind a counter, head bent over a bow like a surgeon repairing a bird. He wore a navy apron, its front sequined with sawdust. His hair was a storm that had decided to stay. He looked up, and his eyes did that thing some people's eyes do, where they take an extra second not to judge you. "You're open?" I asked. "I'm awake," he said, which turned out to be the same thing for him. "You're the radio girl." I flinched. He caught it. The voice, he amended. "You say the call letters in the tone that makes people stop thinking of traffic and remember their breathing." I wanted to put that sentence in my pocket and save it for a day my name felt like a paper cut. "I'm Mara," I said. "Theo," he replied. He lifted the bow to the light, then to his cheek, as if listening with skin. "What time does your day consider itself?" "Ask me in an hour," I said. "I'll be wrong then, too." He smiled without baring teeth. "Want to hear a secret?" I nodded. Theo stepped out from behind the counter and touched the door to the back room with the reverence of a person waking a sleeping dog. "Don't touch anything," he said. "Unless it calls you by name." The back room was a forest. Ribs of instruments curved on racks like lines from a poem. A cello leaned in the corner, wrapped in a blanket the color of warm dust. On a workbench, a violin slept face down on a cushion. Theo picked up the violin as if it had told him a joke. He tucked it under his chin, lifted the bow, and pulled a long note from it, a sound that started in the floor and rose up through my lungs like steam. The room honed the tone until it shone. "Everything is a box that sings," he said, lowering the bow. "If you give it an entrance and an exit and teach the air inside how to move." I nodded. "Studios, lungs, violins." "Rooms," he said. "Hearts." We stood in the soft aftersound. Theo set the violin down, tender as a person placing a sleeping child in a crib. "What brings you in?" he asked, which I think is what he asked everyone. He meant, what broke? What can we take apart gently and teach to be whole? "My place burned," I said. He didn't flinch or shape an apology for the whole world. He just said, as if I had named a weather he already knew. "Then you need a sound that remembers home." He opened a drawer and took out a small, handheld field recorder older than my career, its edges smoothed down by someone's careful pockets. "This one's temperamental," he said, "but it hears true. Borrow it. Walk. Bring me back something the city forgot to throw away." I have my own." "Good," he said. "Bring them both. Old ears, new ears." I put the recorder in my bag like a lighthouse puts light in itself, to carry. The bell didn't ring when I left, it yawned. I looked back and saw Theo put his hand on the bell's metal as if thanking it for doing its small job. I walked. At night, scaffolding learns to sing. Metal grates ping softly when stray drips find them. Tarps undulate in winds so weak they would go unreported. A cat watches you from somewhere you can't see. A delivery truck's air brakes exhale like a giant setting down a heavy thought. I recorded gently, not to capture but to invite. On the second block, a neon sign promised alterations in a font from a warmer decade. The shop's front window held mannequins with pins in their hems like small stars. A woman inside sat at a machine, her back as straight as the needle's path. I lifted my phone to catch the stitching swirl. She looked up and saw me. I wiggled my fingers in a greeting shaped like apology. She waved me in with emotion that was neither intrusion nor invitation, but something older, something like we both know the hour. Come sit in it with me. The sign on the door read Heloisa. Threads Heloisa. Pasa, she said when the bell chimed me into the room. Come in. Her accent was a map I wanted to unfold and smooth with my palms. She wore half-moon glasses and a tape measure like a necklace. I'm Mara, I said, then added, because names make rooms safer, Veles. She said, Borakua, and I almost cried just to be named so accurately in a city that kept offering to shorten me. Sit. I fixed the sleeve, and then we talk like humans. I sat on a low stool that had clearly been many people's small island. The shop smelled like chalk and steamed cloth, like all the ways a person could become more themselves with pins. Dona Heloisa guided the fabric under the needle with the wisdom of someone who had once mended a parachute mid-fall. You work nights, she said, the way meteorologists announce rain. I do now, I said. Good. That is when stitches tell the truth. She finished the sleeve and bit the end of the thread, a tiny ceremony. Then she poured tea from a thermos that had been new some time before I was born. The thing about burning, she said, without asking if I had burned, is it teaches you what sound ash makes when it agrees to stop pretending to be a table. I laughed, helpless. It came out like a hiccup and a prayer at once. Yes, I said. You have tears, she noted, the way a doctor might say, you have a pulse. I'm trying to record them, I said. Not the crying. The edges. She nodded. Bring me something useless, she said, and her eyes sparkled. We will make it useful together. I don't know your name, I said, though I did. It was on the sign. But I wanted her to choose it for me. Heloisa, she said. Dona if you are stubborn. Hello if you are tired. I'm both, I said. Then both, she replied, and smiled the kind of smile that says, you found a door. Come back when you can carry more. I walked out with my pockets full of her tea's warmth. At the corner, rain started, a careful one, the kind that doesn't insist but persists. I lifted Theo's old recorder and let the rain choose the sound. It chose the rhythm of patience. Back in Studio B, I laid the night out on the desk like a seamstress spreads cloth. I listened. I labeled. I stitched. The old recorder was crackly, yes, but it heard in a rounder way, as if every sound had a small glow around it. My phone was precise, clean as a scalpel. Together, they remembered the city with 2 ears. I spoke into the mic. If you're hearing this, I said, you survived the unmaking. You're still not sure how to be a noun when everything you own turned back into verbs. Burn, break, leave. So tonight we won't name. We'll sound. I laid in the scaffolding's tender ping, the low hum of the soda machine in the green room like a friend clearing their throat to say, I'm here if you want to talk. I tucked the sewing machines were under my words like a heartbeat determined to mend. I named it Thread 003. I sent it, anonymously, because anonymity felt like a coat I could wear while my skin decided what shape to be, to a small newsletter of audio artists who traded sounds the way kids traded stickers. It left my hands. It went where sound goes, which is everywhere. In the morning, Theo found me in the loading dock with a paper cup of coffee and the look of a man who has heard something worth waking for. You sent a nighttime seam, he said. I did. It circled back. He tapped his phone. A friend of a friend of a friend had forwarded a link that led back to me. It's good, Mara. Not just pretty. True. Hearing my name lowercase in his mouth, Mara, like a note, made me feel oddly safe. I took the coffee. It was the good kind, the kind you buy on purpose. I've been building boxes that sing, he said, eyes bright. If you want to borrow a corner of my shop for an hour a week to make your threads, I'll tune the room to your voice. My mouth said yes before my caution could think of how to spell no. Yes, I said. Please. He nodded like a craftsman who had just fitted two pieces that had always wanted each other. There are gifts with price tags and gifts that cost a person time. This was both and neither. And it arrived exactly when it did. Like rain. Like breath. Theo's back room had already learned to hold a violin's cry without flinching. It learned my voice with equal patience. He showed me how to place soft hangings in the corners so the air would not get nervous and bounce. He brought me tea in a mug that had once been someone else's favorite and now didn't mind sharing. Talk, he said, setting the mug down. The room will listen. At first, I talked to Phil. Then I learned to talk to Carrie. If you are hearing this, I began, you may have run out of synonyms for tired. That's okay. We're going to borrow someone else's strength tonight. We're going to listen to the harbor. I walked to the waterfront before dusk and waited while the day tried to decide if it wanted to be forgiven for leaving. Seagulls argued in vowels. A man with a bucket threw fish heads into the water, and the water said thank you in ripples. Somewhere, beyond the curve of the pier, a lighthouse, long retired, gave the sky the shape of a story I wanted to hear. I asked the harbor what it remembered. It answered with splashes against old wood, with the thud of rope on a dock, with the wind finding a forgotten whistle in a railing, with the distant horn of a ship practicing its name. I tucked my recorder into the crook of my elbow and closed my eyes so my ears could see better. Back at Theo's, I layered the harbor under a story I had been carrying since the station had called my concept too soft. The story was of a keeper, a woman with hands cracked from cold and salt, who watched boats lift their eyes to her light without ever knowing her name. She had fallen in love with the routine, the trimming, the tending, the simple righteousness of showing up, night after night, so others could make it home. I called her Isella because the word felt like a wave deciding not to break. I gave her a room with a stove that hummed, a cat that slept like punctuation, and a diary that began the day she decided not to marry the man the town expected. I didn't know yet that the world would care about Isella. I only knew that speaking her made me stand up straighter. She had a spine like the line of a cliff. She did not budge when storms tried to shove the whole sea through her door. She polished the lens and poured herself a cup of soup and let the wind think it won. I recorded the story in a voice that didn't want praise. It wanted to be a blanket. Then I released it. Not to the station. To the small, stubborn places that still welcome careful things, the newsletter. A forum where night shift nurses trade playlists. A DM to 3 listeners who had written to me, months ago, about the way the building breathed and how they had learned to listen. I titled it Thread 004, What the Harbor Remembers. In the morning, my inbox inhaled. The subject lines were small ships. I needed this. My mother was a keeper. I cried in the parking garage and feel better now. Your voice is a room. I sat on the green room couch and read until the letters blurred into one tender river. Then I wrote back, not all of them. There were more than I could hold, but enough to feel like a person tying knots in a net so it would catch the next one who fell. At noon, Elliot stopped at the doorway. He held a printout of something. His face looked like someone else's face wearing Elliot as a mask. This is yours, he asked, the question doing that managerial thing where it tried to split hair into 80 equal pieces. It is, I said. It's gaining traction. He said the word traction like an apology for liking something that didn't report to him. Someone at a network reached out to ask if we knew you were doing this. You don't, I said. He nodded. He stepped into the room, then out, then in again, like an actor unsure of his blocking. I can try to make space, he said, voice earnest, and I believed he meant it. A special feature. A midnight series. We can leverage night. No, I said, not unkind. This isn't leverage. It's a life. Mara, he said, and my name cracked his voice wider than he expected. I believed the wrong person. It was a sentence that had to cost him something. I honored the currency by not spending it too fast. You did, I said. I can't undo the contract, he said, palms out, empty. I can make a door. Thank you, I said. Not yet. He swallowed. He nodded. He left. For the first time in months, I didn't hate him. He had not been my villain. He had been a man who chose easy and was surprised to find it was expensive. That evening, I brought thread 004 to Heloisa. She played it from a phone whose screen held long, neat cracks, as if it had tried to become a stained glass window and failed gently. She didn't nod in the obvious places. She paused twice to rewind, not to the lines people screenshot, but to the breaths between. Bueno, she said finally, a judgment and a blessing and a stitch. You learn to leave space. Space is where the listener lives. I thought I had to fill, I said. You have to carry, she corrected, with the firm kindness of a woman who has pinned many hems. And you are learning. She handed me a small tin that once held cookies and now held straight pins, black as commas. Take, she said. I laughed. I don't sew. You do, she said. With air. Put these on your desk. When you talk, look at them. Remember, every sentence needs a pause that can fasten. I took the tin home, to the couch, to the locker, to the back room at Theo's where home meant the place I make sound. The pins in their bed of felt blinked up at me like stars I could rearrange. When the station aired the first pilot of Night Harbor, June's voice a careful gentleness, the sounds a little too smooth, I did not throw anything. I listened with my hands flat on my knees. It was pretty. It was fine. It felt like a hotel room with clean sheets and a view of a city you didn't live in. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I wrote thread 005 about the difference between comfort and care. If you are hearing this, I said, you have been offered comfort and found it didn't fit. Comfort is a blanket someone hands you without asking if you run hot or cold. Care tucks the blanket under your feet and brings you water. Tonight, we will practice care for ourselves. I taught a breath I learned from Elisa in engineering. 4 counts in, 7 counts hold, 8 counts out, not because it is magic, but because it gives you something to do while the world decides whether to be kind. I laid in the sound of the old recorder's gentle hiss, like a friend reminding you the air still works. The comments came like birds to seed. Not loud. Many. Theo drew me a tiny lighthouse and pencil on a scrap of maple and left it on the desk. For your pocket, he said, and I immediately gave it a job, to remind me that light that stays put is still a rescue. A week later, Heloisa handed me an envelope with no return address. Inside was one of my missing notebook pages, singed at the corner, a line underlined in blue pencil, a show that doesn't fix you, keeps you company. No note. No explanation. My stomach made the sound of a door worrying about whether it would hold. I looked up at Heloisa. She lifted a shoulder. Neighborhoods talk, she said. Some talk garbage. Some talk grace. You get to pick what you listen to. I put the page in the cookie tin's lid, a tiny altar. I refused to give it the voice of a threat. I gave it the job of a reminder that even the worst hands cannot hold everything. That weekend, a message arrived from a small audio festival, the kind with cookies on folding tables and a banner that tries hard to be straight. We heard what the harbor remembers. Would you consider a late-night listening session? The stipend would not buy a coat, but it would pay for a week of dignity. I said yes. I wore my one good sweater and brought the field recorders like nervous pets. I spoke in the gentle voice because that is what the room needed. Afterward, people came up and told me pieces of their lives. A woman whose husband drove long haul and listened to my threads at rest stops. A teenager who had learned to breathe like 478 during panic and wanted to teach her mother. A man who cried without apology in the third row and made me want to kneel and thank his tears for their work. On my way out, I saw June in the lobby, standing by a poster for Night Harbor's panel. Her hair was a banner. Her face was tired in a way makeup couldn't find. She saw me and started toward me, an apology or an argument in the set of her mouth. I shook my head once, not cruelly, and kept walking. Outside, the air was so clean it felt like the sky had washed its face. I put the lighthouse scrap in my pocket, thumbed the pencil grooves, and thought, I am not where I thought I would be. I am somewhere. That night, back at Theo's, I recorded thread 006, the house you carry. If you're hearing this, I said, you think home is a place they can take or burn or rename. But listen, you have a house that no one sees because you carry it. It is built of breaths you survived, rooms made of the times you sat with your own hurt and did not try to make it smaller. Tonight, we will walk through it. I guided the listener to a room with a window that looked onto a memory they loved, to a chair that fit their body now, not the body they had before. I told them the house had a kitchen where someone, maybe me, maybe them, was warming soup. I told them there was a drawer filled with letters from future days when their name would feel sweet again. When I finished, I sat in the quiet and cried, not the sharp kind, the flowing kind that knows where it's going without a map. Theo didn't come in. He knew that some rooms meant better without witnesses. When I opened the door, the bell chimed exactly once. It felt like a promise. On my walk back to the station, a breeze rounded the corner with my name in it. Valesse, it said, all the syllables intact. I lifted my head. The city breathed. I breathed back. I was not okay always, but more and more I was here. And here, I was learning, could be a triumph. The morning after the house you carry went live, the station kitchen smelled like oranges and existential dread. Someone had peeled 4 clementinas and abandoned the peels like commas, as if the sentence of their day had paused and never resumed. I pocketed 1 curl of rind. It felt right to carry a quiet brightness. My locker held new things. A spare toothbrush Elisa had labeled Vles in blocky letters, a tiny bottle of fabric softener with a post-it from Heloisa, para suavizar lo aspero, to soften the rough. Between the toothbrush and the softener, a folded receipt from a hardware store. On the back, in pencil, night listens. Keep talking. The handwriting was neither June's tidy certainty nor the jagged performance from my ransacked table. It was an old hand, patient. I pictured Theo paying for glue and deciding the back of the paper was too clean to waste on silence. I had promised myself a walk before noon. Promises are rooms you can step inside when the world forgets you have a body. The city was rehearsing spring without committing to it. The trees wore little dark green buds. A man swept his stoop with the pride of a king arranging his throne. I recorded the broom's gentle shush and thought of the sound rooms make when they forgive the dust for being alive. On 3rd Street, a boy on a skateboard carried a cello case like an argument he'd agreed to love. He wobbled, laughed, studied. I wanted to follow him and ask the case what it had heard on the way here. I let him roll away. Not every sound wants to be borrowed. My feet turned, without asking me first, toward Hilo's Heloisa. The sign's paint had faded into the palette of old photographs. Inside, the light held its own breath. Hello, I called softly, and the bell answered for me. Estoy, she said from the back. I'm here, and I felt the sentence enter my blood like iron. I found her measuring a hem that had changed its mind twice. The steam from her iron curled like a thought that wasn't ready to land. I brought something useless, I said, and placed the curled rind on her counter. It's a piece of mourning. She didn't laugh. She lifted the rind to her nose and inhaled, as if scent were a language with better verbs. Yes, she said. Useless like rain. Which is to say, necessary. She set the rind beside a small pile of buttons that did not match each other, and therefore matched life. How is your voice? She asked without looking up. Tired and awake, I said. Like a good nurse. Good. Let it nap between patients. I sat on the stool that had a groove in it specifically shaped for people who didn't plan to stay but did. Can I sit while you sew? Only if you sigh, she said. The room needs one from you. I sighed. The room softened. She ran the machine. The sound stitched the morning together. When I left, she handed me a paper bag. No peeking, she said. Not yet. It will tell you when. I waited 2 blocks, then peeked. Inside, a small rectangle of muslin embroidered with a single lighthouse in blue, the stitches slightly uneven in the way handmade beauty refuses to be mistaken for factory. At the bottom, a pocket. Inside the pocket, a folded scrap of muslin stitched with the word Respira. Breathe. I put the little lighthouse in the tin with the pins and the recovered notebook page and Theo's pencil lighthouse. My altar of small insistences. At the shop next door, Theo was holding a violin like a question he enjoyed asking. He nodded to the muslin, pleased. Heloisa makes the sort of cloth that remembers you, he said. I need a room like that, I said. Use mine, he said, as if generous weren't a word he had to think about. I set up my small universe, the recorders, the notebook now replaced by a stack of index cards Elisa had rescued from a supply closet and decorated with little hearts in ballpoint, the muslin lighthouse propped against a jar of pegs like a tiny flag. The room inhaled us. If you're hearing this, I said to the air, you've learned that not all threads are spun from joy. Some are pulled from the edge of a frayed day. Today we're going to gather the loose ones not to tame them, but to braid them gently so they stop catching on everything. I told the story of a woman who collects sounds the way some people collect shells, not for value, but for promise. I gave her pockets that never judge their contents. I gave her a little tin with pins and a tiny lighthouse and a single word folded in a pocket, Respira. I layered the sewing machine's kindness under a new sound, a cello warming its voice in a room not made for music. The boy from 3rd Street had paused in the alley to retune, and the alley, surprised, had learned to make itself an audience. His low C string was a basement singing to itself. I asked if I could borrow a single note. He nodded without removing the chin from his instrument and gave me a whole minute that felt like a small train arriving on time in my chest. I named the piece thread 007 New Threads. I send it where sound goes. The night held it. Morning returned it with the sound of more people breathing together than I was used to. Then the ripples started soft, like a raft landing. A librarian in Ohio wrote to say she played my threads in the stacks after closing to remind the paper it was safe to rest. A subway operator in Queens said he took his break with the house you carry and returned to his cab with steadier hands. A mother on the North Shore recorded her 3-year-old falling asleep to what the harbor remembers and asked if she could send the clip. I said yes, then cried into my tea when the tiny breath synced up with the sound of old waves. That afternoon, a message appeared from an account with a name that was not a real person's name. The avatar was a picture of a beach too perfect to be a beach. The message said only, "You are kind." I was not. I am sorry. June. Or someone pretending to be June. Or someone else, capable of guilt. The rhythm of the apology had her cadence, though, a straight line from admission to absolution without stopping at repair. I stared. I didn't reply. Not yet. Some sentences you have to set on the windowsill and see if they try to become birds. By evening, the station hallway felt less like a corridor and more like the pause between two honest sentences. People smiled with their eyes and didn't overreach with their mouths. Elliot passed me a manila folder labeled Independent Creators, Evening Feature Slots, and pretended he was not doing what he was doing. Look, if you... Not yet, I said. He nodded. Doors. I know, I said. Thank you. He left before he could say he was proud. I appreciated that. Pride from someone who had missed the first half of your storm is heavy to hold. Near midnight, I went back to the green room to check if the soda machine still believed in me. On the coffee table, a small paper boat folded from the corner of a printout. On the side, a tiny lighthouse sketched in pencil. Theo's storm hair peered in through the door window and retreated, like a cat making sure you saw the gift, but not his face. I unfolded the boat. On the inside, in small writing, "We can build with driftwood, too." I built thread 008 with driftwood. The scraps that didn't belong anywhere else. A bus braking softly. A dog's collar ringing one optimistic jingle. My own voice, briefly laughing at nothing dramatic, just the relief of finding socks that matched in a bag that had forgotten how to be a drawer. I slept that night for 3 hours in a row. A record for the new life. When I woke, I knew something had shifted. Not the world. Me. The house I carried had acquired a hallway between the room where I forgave myself and the room where I remembered I could be bright. It happens like this. You make a thing with your full, unfancy heart and hand it to 10 people. One of them carries it across a river, one leaves it on a bus, one keeps it in their coat pocket like a worry stone, and one, just one, finds a window that had been painted closed and pries it up. In the morning, what the harbor remembers sailed. A showrunner at a small, stubborn network posted it on their personal feed with exactly 7 words. This felt like being walked home, gently. A union of night shift workers retweeted with "For us." A poet with a long, patient following wrote, "A lighthouse that stays put and still finds you." They quoted Isella, the keeper, "You don't have to find me. I'm here." The little numbers did what numbers do when they believe they matter. My phone started a quiet thunder that didn't let up. I put it face down and did the dishes in the break room because soapy water knows how to receive panic and return calm. Elisa found me with sleeves wet to my elbows and said, "You're trending like an introvert. All the right people, none of the wrong noise." I don't know what to do. Don't do, she said. B. Answer the messages you want. Let the others float. I answered the ones that felt like hands, not nets. A community college in Tucson wanted to play the thread in a mindfulness workshop for first-gen students. Yes, a wellness brand wanted to integrate my voice into their soothing product journey. No, a national magazine asked for a quote about the rise of gentle audio. Sound was always gentle, I wrote back. We just grew brave enough to be quiet again. At lunch, my mother called. I had not told her about the fire because I did not know how to say, "I lost the room I kept your old letters in," without making her worry in a way that would hurt her bones. But mothers have sensors. "Me Pharaoh," she said, "why is your voice everywhere?" I told the sky a story, I said. The wind took it. "The wind is wise," she said. "Come eat." I will. Soon. Come sooner. We hung up with 3 kisses because our family believes odd numbers keep secrets polite. In the late afternoon, the station invited me into Studio A under the official pretense of a tech check. Elliot sat in the producer's chair with his hands folded like he had borrowed them. June was not there. The absence of June was a presence. "I want to offer you a series," he said, and then before I could bristle he added, "Not to take. To hold. We won't call it anything. It will just be you, after midnight, 2 nights a week, for as long as you say." He had learned new words. I liked them. They aligned better with air. "What about an ownership clause?" I asked. "I keep the rights." "Yes," he said, and then seemed surprised that his mouth had said it. He had expected to argue. He had prepared little boxes in the air. He set them down. "Yes." "And a disclosure on Night Harbor," I said. "A credit in the description, concept inspired by the work of." The pause was not negotiable, it was a breath. He nodded. "I can get that through." "Do," I said. He exhaled. Something unclenched in his shoulders. "I made mistakes," he said, not as an excuse, but as a weather report. "It is raining because clouds are heavy." I believed the wrong person. "You believed the easy person," I said. "You can choose different now." He nodded. "I am." I shook his hand because the room was not big enough for absolution, and anyway, absolution is not a one-player game. On my way out, I nearly collided with June in the hallway. She had a stack of papers and the kind of skin that looked like it had negotiated hard with sleep and lost. She stopped. I stopped. The papers thought about jumping ship and settled. "We should talk," she said. "About what?" My voice was plain. "No heat, no ice." "About everything," she said, which is what people say when they haven't chosen a single thing to be sorry for yet. "Pick one," I said. "Start there." She looked down. The papers shifted again. "The note wasn't me," she said. "In your apartment." "I know," I said. I didn't know, not like a fact, but like a tide. She had sharp tools, words, positioning, but not that jaggedness. Her betrayals were the kind that passed as etiquette. Her chin trembled in a way I had never seen it move. "I thought they needed a face," she said softly. "I thought I could be the vessel and you could be the ocean." I told myself I was protecting the water. And the tide was supposed to be grateful, I said. I'm sorry, she said, and this time the sentence had a weight that could hold a cup. I'm sorry. She looked up. Her eyes held water that had learned patience. I did a cruel thing to something kind. I don't know how to fix that. Don't fix me, I said. Let me be. And when someone in a meeting tries to shrink a voice like mine, use your face to stop the shrinking. She nodded, as if making a silent appointment. I can do that. We stood in each other's weather for a minute without pretending the forecast had changed. Then I stepped aside, the way you do at a narrow doorway, you first, then me. She went one way. I went another. The hallway did not require applause. That night, I played what the harbor remembers live for the first time. Not the file. The story. In Studio A, old boards under new paint, I turned off the overheads and let the table lamps make little islands of permission. I spoke in the pace of someone remembering how to be held. If you're hearing this, I said, you survived a hard tide. You did not drown. Tonight, I will keep watch. I felt the listeners gather. Not as numbers. As breaths. The phone line lit, the quiet way, the way that means nurses on break and janitors on their second cup and truckers parked beneath bridges. I answered 3 calls. A woman who left her window open in winter to be reminded she was brave. A man who forgave his brother and didn't know where to set the absence of anger. A child up past bedtime who whispered, "Do lighthouses get tired?" and waited for an answer that wouldn't scare her. They do, I said. That's why we build them strong. So when they're tired, they still stand. After the show, I walked to the water. The night was the clean kind. The old lighthouse didn't have its light anymore, but it still had its shape. I sat on a bench and let my spine learn its line. A woman took the bench's other end. She nodded without asking me to talk. My aunt kept the light at Portofino, she said finally, as if we were in the kitchen after the party and truth had come down from the shelf. She used to say, the trick is to love the routine so the storms don't trick you into thinking they are special. I smiled, stunned by how grief and grace share a border. Your aunt was wise. She also made terrible flan. The woman laughed, then stood. Thanks for the light. You're welcome for the routine, I said, and she left me the bench as if benches could be bequeathed at midnight. Back at Theo's, a note under the door in the careful hand of someone who hadn't wanted to slip a note under a door since the 3rd grade. We have a little money. Friends want to give you a corner. No strings. Just shelves. It was signed with 3 names, Elisa, Theo, Heloisa. I didn't cry. I built a list. Shelves. A chair that fit. A kettle. A mat for shoes that remembered you when you came back. A window if the rent allowed. A sign that said, only Respira. You're here. I slept 4 hours. I dreamed of lighthouses wearing sweaters. Contracts rhyme if you read enough of them. They all promise and warn in the same timbre. Still, seeing my name in one spelled correctly, accent over the envelopes like a flag planted on a real hill, made my fingers tremble. Elliot slid the pages across the table with delicacy, as if he had learned the difference between paper and skin. Independent series, he said. Rights retained by you. Broadcast license non-exclusive. We'll pay decently. Not enough to buy a world, but enough to tip it toward your side. I want an exit clause with more door than hinge, I said. He smiled in the way men smile when they realize you came to the meeting with shoes and a spine. Done. And the night harbor description? He turned the monitor. In the show notes, beneath the tidy marketing copy, a sentence waited, concept grounded in the early work and ideas of audio artist Mara Velez, whose independent series, Thread by Thread, explores gentle nighttime storytelling. It was not complete truth, not an admission nor an apology, but it was a breadcrumb. People who knew how to follow crumbs would find me. It won't undo, he said. It will name, I said. Names are handles. People can hold the right story with one. He signed first. I signed after. Paper learned a new meaning of my name. Do you want a launch party? He asked, and I laughed so suddenly the air got shy. No, I said. I want a kettle. He blinked. A kettle. For the room, I said. For the corner my friends want to give me. I folded the contract into my bag and felt like I was sliding a map into a pocket I had sewn myself. The corner was a narrow slice of a former photography studio on a block that had seen 3 waves of coffee shops and refused to drown. The wall was brick that remembered being useful. The floor was wood that had endured bad shoes and forgiven them. A window looked onto a fire escape and then onto a sliver of sky that took color seriously. We cleaned in the old way. Radios too loud, sleeves rolled, jokes that did not need to be smart to be bomb. Elisa strong-armed a sagging bookshelf into believing in right angles again. Theo tuned the room with his hands, hung soft fabric, placed a rug like you seat a guest of honor, set a chair at the exact distance from the mic stand where the air would be gentle to vowels. Heloisa measured the window 3 times and sewed a curtain that could be drawn with one finger. Shelves, Elisa said, triumphant, and set down a stack of pine planks that smelled like monks deciding not to argue. You get 3. The rest are for later. On the top shelf, I placed the tin with the pins, the muslin lighthouse, the recovered notebook page, the pencil sketch from Theo. On the second, the kettle. On the third, a jar I labeled Letters I Can Read When I Forget Who I Am, which was, that day, empty. I sat in the chair. It fit. It would not always fit. Chairs and bodies change. Today it fit. I cried the kind of cry that washes the eyes so they can see the next street sign. If you are hearing this, I said to the room, not recording yet, just practicing truth, this is the sound of a woman carrying her own house into a corner with shelves. I recorded thread 009, the weight of names with the microphone pointed at my mouth and my chest at an angle that told my body it was safe to be heard. If you are hearing this, I whispered, you have a name with a true weight, and the world keeps trying to measure it with the wrong scale. Tonight, we will put our names down gently and see what they weigh when they are not performing for anyone. I told the story of my last name, how Velez came from a mouth in Puerto Rico that had tasted salt and guava and the kind of love that makes you sit down, and how, in this city, the accent tried to fall off like a leaf no one watered. I talked about the first time a teacher said Velez as if the word were a hill she didn't want to climb, and how my mother went to school the next day with a paper that had my name written 10 times and said, "My daughter is not a hill. She's a line you follow to the sea." I laid under it the sound of Theo tightening a peg carefully, not to break the string, to ask it to hold more without snapping. I tucked in Heloisa's scissors, their click of punctuation that never cut the sentence short. I let the kettle's tiny crescendo announce the moment water remembers it is alive enough to steam. I didn't send it right away. I waited until dusk, then walked the flash drive to the station like a folded letter you give to a friend you're learning to trust again. I handed it to Elliot and watched him drag the file into the system with fingers that had learned which keys to press and which to leave alone. "It'll be at 12:07, he said. "Right after the weather." "Perfect," I said. "Weather, then names." He grinned. "We'll put the credit under Night Harbor today." "Good," I said. "And tell June, nothing. I'll tell her myself someday." He nodded, relieved. At 12:07, I sat in my corner with the light low and the kettle half full and listened to my own name become a room other people could sit inside. The phone vibrated. I didn't look. The messages can wait when the breath is happening now. After, I walked home the long way. The air carried hints of bread and brake dust and teenage laughter. A bus stop bench held a man asleep with his mouth open in a way that made me want to tuck a blanket under his chin. I recorded the city saying my name without syllables, just the shape of here, and felt the weight settle, not heavy, not light. Real. On my door, a note in an envelope whose seal had been fought with and then persuaded. Inside, 5 pages torn from a legal pad, copied in blue pen from a hand I recognized. Not neat anymore. Messy in a way that suggested a person unlearning performance. June's letter. It began, "You asked me to pick one thing. I picked 3. I chose my face over your work. I told myself it was protection. It was theft. I told myself you didn't need the credit. That was a lie I enjoyed because it made me large. I was smaller than I pretended. I am trying to be exact now." I read it twice, then put it into the jar labeled Letters I Can Read When I Forget Who I Am. It didn't fix anything. It helps something stand. In the morning, a check arrived from the station with a number that wouldn't buy a city but would rent a week of Not Scared. I bought a second chair. For guests, I told myself. For the part of me that still needs permission. I wrote the words thread by thread on a piece of paper and taped it to the wall crookedly, because crooked is how truth hangs when you don't hire a stylist. The corner accepted its name. The room exhaled. And in the quiet after, I realized something. Triumph did not feel like trumpets. It felt like the precise click of a kettle lid closing. It felt like the weight of my own last name, held in my own hand, not to throw, not to brandish, just to recognize. I made tea. I wrote a list for thread 010. At the top, good always outlasts evil by breathing longer. Underneath, teach breathing again. I slept. The city watched the window and kept my place. The corner learned my breath as if it had been rehearsing for me all along. By the second week, the kettle understood the timing of my voice and started its soft crescendo just as I reached certain sentences. By the third, the chair adjusted to the fact that I sit forward when I'm telling the listener to imagine a window and lean back when I tell them they are already safe. The curtain, Heloisa's curtain, held dusk like a bull. I made a sign for the door that nobody read but me. Knock softly. A room is learning. If you are hearing this, I told the mic, you have mistaken stillness for failure. Tonight we will sit, and our sitting will move mountains the way moss moves stone by staying. I took the listener through rooms they remembered, but had never toured with a guide, the hallway where they keep all the almost decisions, the cupboard where they store the words they wish they'd said but are saving for later, the porch built of breaths that survived sharp days. I taught them how to place their name on a shelf gently and how to take it back down more gently still. Between takes, I opened letters. A paramedic wrote, I play thread 006 before I sleep. It feels like washing my hands, but inside. A middle school janitor wrote, I thought I hated quiet. Turns out I just hadn't met it. A woman from Ponce sent a voicemail that began, ESARRRNVLS, Gracias por no perderla, the rolled RA lineage, and I cried into my sleeve exactly the way my mother would have predicted. The jar labeled Letters I Can Read When I Forget Who I Am filled and made a polite, happy weight on the third shelf. The first time it almost toppled, Theo anchored it with a flat river stone. Every room needs ballast, he said, and left his hand on the jar a second longer, like a benediction. Elliot kept his promise. Twice a week, 12:07 a.m., a small chime in our city's dark, thread by thread. The station read the credit under Night Harbor without choking. Sometimes they even said my last name correctly. Once, June said it on air herself, careful, like a bridge she'd measured twice. I listened from the doorway to my corner, hand on the jam like it was a shoulder. I didn't feel triumph. I felt restoration, the way a chair returns to four legs after wobbling for a season. And then the offers arrived in the posture of possibility. A podcast network wanted to host an anthology of my threads. A local arts grant asked me to apply for community audio healing. A bookstore offered their back room for a listening night with cookies. I chose like a gardener, not a conqueror. Things that fed the soil, yes. Things that required me to shout no. For the bookstore night, I printed a single-page program that read only, You are here. You made it. Breathe. 50 folding chairs learned to be enough. People came in quietly and left their loud days at the door. I dimmed the lamps until the room's edges dissolved, and we listened together in the radical ordinary. After, a man waited until the end of the line to hand me a photograph of a lighthouse small enough to fit in my palm. I took it the day after my divorce, he said. I didn't know where to put my hands, so I put them around the camera. Thank you for giving them something else to hold. I put the photo on the second shelf, next to the kettle, because some light likes company. When I unlocked the corner the next morning, a package waited, a brass nameplate, the kind that belongs on a door that has survived decades. Thread by thread in simple letters, Marvelous beneath, accent intact. No note. I knew the culprits, 3 friends who thought no strings attached meant use nicer screws. I attached the plate with the reverence of a notary public officiating a marriage between a room and its purpose. The screwdriver slipped once and nicked my thumb. I licked the tiny copper taste and thought, yes. Rooms are built from little bloods, too. That night, I recorded thread 010, the house you carry, and when I finished, the corner exhaled in a way I'd never heard, almost like the room had laughed, softly, at a private joke. Maybe it had finally translated me. I slept 5 hours, the new kind of wealth. Consequences arrived without fanfare. They rarely wear boots. Night Harbor's second-month numbers sagged like a sail bored with its wind. The show wasn't bad, it was polite. The audience could taste the difference. Politeness is a condiment, not a meal. One afternoon, I found June sitting on the station steps, phone face down on her knee, eyes doing the thing eyes do when they have used up their adjectives. She saw me and didn't stand. Good, I thought. Staying seated is a kind of truth. I'm losing it, she said, as if something were slipping through her fingers that had never wanted to be held that way. It isn't working without whatever you do. You're doing what you do, I said. Pretty. Clean. Air-conditioned. What I do is open the window and let in the weather. She let the sentence sit. She had learned. I told Elliot I can't be the face if it means someone else's voice is the ghost in the walls. I sat beside her. Steps carry confessions better than chairs. What did he say? That he was trying to choose different. She folded and unfolded the corner of a flyer. He asked me what I wanted that didn't take anything from anyone. And? I want to help make things I'm not in, she said, and her face changed in the way faces change when the truth in the middle stops chewing its cud and finally swallows. I don't know who I am if I'm not the name on the slide. I'd like to find out. We watched a pigeon negotiate a pretzel. It won eventually by choosing smaller bites. Wisdom in a gray suit. I'm not ready to be friends, I said. I know, she said. I'm not asking. I'm around. Not in your way. We sat for another quiet minute, an expensive, spacious minute paid for by many bad ones. Then I stood. Use your meetings to stop the shrinking, I said, repeating the assignment I'd given her in the hallway week. That's a friendlier legacy than a face. I will, she said, and I believed her. At the corner, I found a letter slid under the door on thick paper with too much embossing. A wellness app wanted to buy thread by thread and integrate it into a holistic sleep journey. They offered enough money to buy nicer shelves and a louder kettle. I put the letter in the bottom drawer, closed it, made tea, and recorded thread 011, saying no kindly. If you're hearing this, I said, you have been offered a golden leash. Tonight we practice declining with tenderness and precision. We remember that a no is not a weapon, but a fence that keeps the garden safe. I layered the sound of a fence gate creaking in a friendly way over a street of children playing a game with rules they were inventing as they ran. I taught 3 sentences. That's not for me. I'm choosing small on purpose. I wish you well over there. The messages that followed were like people sending each other maps to wells. I said no to a promotion that wasn't actually a promotion. I left a group chat that made me forget my soft voice. I turned off my phone at midnight and woke to silence I liked. Later that week, the small audio festival invited me back, not for a set but for a conversation. I asked if I could bring my friends. Bring the whole harbor, the organizer said, and so I did. Elisa with her screwdriver and her soft spine, Theo with a violin and a smile that kept secrets politely, Heloisa with a thread case and a pin cushion shaped like a tomato that had seen continents. We sat in a circle on a low stage and talked like we were in a kitchen. No slides. No growth metrics. Just stories about stubborn rooms and soft skills. People lined the walls, not because there weren't enough chairs, but because some truths are better heard leaning. An audience member asked, "How did you forgive?" And the wind in my chest went still, listening for my mouth. I answered the only honest way. I didn't forgive, and then the room opened, I said. The room opened while I was still mad. The room taught me that forgiveness is not a key you turn, it's a door you stop leaning on. Some days I lean. Some days I don't. After, we ate cookies that tasted like 4th grade. June hovered at the edge and left before hovering became intrusion. That, too, was a kindness. At home, my new home, a small third-floor studio with a window that faced a brick wall kind enough to reflect morning, I opened the bottom drawer and took out the letter with the leash. I wrote, "No, thank you," on the reply line, then added, "May your product find its proper breath." I put on a stamp shaped like a Luna moth and felt ceremonial. That night, wind blew from the east and found the corner. The curtain moved like a person remembering a dance. I recorded thread 012, the turning of winds. "If you are hearing this," I whispered, "something shifted while you were washing dishes. You didn't plan it. You can feel it in your ribs. Tonight we will stand in a doorway and let the breeze pass through. We won't cage it or beg it to stay. We'll say, 'Thank you for reminding me I have skin.'" The callers were soft and brave. A new father with an old grief. A woman who left a job that paid her well to keep her small. A teenager who said, "I thought being gentle meant losing." I told him what I wish someone had told me years ago. Gentle is not weak. It's targeted. It's strength that knows where to hold and where to release. When I turned off the lamp, the room glowed with the kind of dark that isn't empty. I slept with the window cracked to let the turning in. The invitation came on paper that felt like skin warmed by sun. Community night, letters to the lighthouse. The library had started a program where people wrote to anything that had kept them safe, and the librarian who shelved my threads at closing asked if I would be the listener in residence. I brought the pins tin and the kettle and the nameplate that technically belonged to the door but liked field trips. We arranged chairs in a circle, no microphones, no stage, just a rug that asked our feet to be kind. People read letters to tents and stairwells and grandmother's hands. A maintenance worker read to his toolbox. A nurse read to her own pulse. A teen read to the space under her bed that wasn't scary anymore because a cat lived there now. When it was my turn, I read a letter to the building that taught me to breathe, the original one, with the radiator that hummed and the exit sign that sang just off key. I thanked the couch in the green room that had held me when I was too proud to call it holding. I thanked the door that had been locked more than it should have been but still learned my hand. I thanked a woman named June without telling her story, and I thanked a man named Elliot for choosing different before he understood how. After, a girl with glitter on her eyelids asked if I would sign her notebook. "I want to make sounds that don't fix people," she said. "But how do you make them move?" "You let them stay," I said, and wrote on her first page, "Be moss, not dynamite." She grinned like I had handed her a pet snake. "Cool," she said. "Gross," and ran away happy. At the corner, the jar got so full we retired it. I put a second jar on the third shelf and labeled it "Letters I Didn't Know I Needed," because sometimes the world knows what your center is hungry for before you do. June sent one more note, on ordinary paper. "I said no in a meeting today when they tried to make a younger producer shave the edges off her name. I used mine as a shield. It worked. I thought you should know what I'm doing with my face." I put it in the jar under the brass plate of my own name, and let the jars do their quiet math. Theo finished an instrument he'd been building for months and named it Isella, the way you name a ship for the water you hope it sails. He played in my corner, one long, honest note, and the room learned to wear it like a scarf. He left a bow hook beside the shelf. "For when you need to hang something that sings," he said, and we both admired the tiny practicality of it. Elliot started a quiet initiative at the station. Concept credits posted publicly, contract templates with doors instead of traps, a gentle shift in how people say names, a small revolution you could miss if you believed only in headlines. I brought cookies to the meeting where he announced it and ate 3 because I am not above sugar as policy. My mother came to visit. She walked through the corner with her hands behind her back like a saint touring a kitchen. She put 2 fingers on the brass nameplate and said, "See," satisfied, as if the plate had finally done something decent with its life. We drank tea. She fell asleep in the second chair and snored like a competent squirrel. I recorded the snore, with permission, and folded it under a future thread about inheritances. And June? We did not braid ourselves back into what we were. We made something else, a quiet truce built on small good acts she did when I wasn't there to award them. Sometimes we sent each other links without commentary. Once, she left a paper bag at my door with a jar of guava paste and no note. I sliced it thin and ate it on crackers and thought about sweetness arriving without apology. One evening, the harbor asked for me. I took my recorder to the old lighthouse and sat on the bench where a woman had once bequeathed me her aunt's wisdom and flan failure. The sky was a bruised peach. The water practiced being mirror and surface at once. If you're hearing this, I said, you made it through. I did not add barely or somehow. I did not recount the fire or the couch or the way my name slipped and then learned to hold. I let the sentence rest on its simple feet. I let the listener place their own bricks under it. This is not a show about winning, I said into the wind. It's a show about outlasting. About the good that breathes longer than the hurt. Tonight, we will sit with the light we make ourselves, not to blind anyone, not to broadcast, just to see the next 3 steps. The water approved. It lapped like applause you don't need to turn around for. Behind me, footsteps approached, then didn't intrude. The person sat a polite distance away. We breathed. I named the file thread 100 the light you make, not because I had counted that far, though I had, but because I wanted to mark the moment with a number that felt round and generous. We aired it at 12:07. I listened from my bed, window cracked, moth flirting with the lamp. The city held me the way I had learned to hold it, lightly, persistently, with room for the next breath. In the morning, an email from a teacher in a small town with a long name. My students made their own threads, she wrote. They interviewed radiators and exit signs. They named their names out loud. We turned the lights off at noon and breathed together. Administration called it unstructured learning, and I called it Tuesday. Thank you for giving us a way to measure time that isn't anxious. I printed it and put it on the first shelf, because teaching is architecture. Later, I took the brass plate off the door and buffed it with the edge of my shirt until my name shone. Not for the city. For the girl who came with glitter on her lids and asked how to move things by staying. For the woman who sat 2 chairs away at the library and wrote to her toolbox. For my mother's rolled R. For the harbor keeper with cracked hands. For the couch that did its small job quietly. For the friends who built shelves with nothing attached but care. And for me, Marvelous, who learned, finally, that calamity does not disqualify you from tenderness, it trains you in its weight. If you are hearing this, wherever you are, my light doesn't move. But it reaches. Come as you are. We'll breathe. We'll sit. We'll outlast the storm by being moss and lighthouse at once. Tonight, like every night, there's room for you.